Welcome to the Living While Loving Your Child Through Addiction podcast. Here we focus on self care as we tend to our own lives while also extending love and compassion to our kids. This podcast offers science backed skills to bring hope and healing to your entire family. Not understanding our kids' behaviors can be maddening. There are often behaviors that just don't add up to us. Like maybe your child can skillfully play a game of chess with you, but can't manage to put their shoes on in time for an appointment. Or maybe they have zero concept of time, but can tell you the gas prices at every gas station in town. The idea for this episode came from a conversation with a client after a coaching session. We were just chatting about some of these things that we had noticed in our kids. And I thought, I wonder if there's any science that backs that up. So I started researching, and what I found, I knew I had to share with you. The client shared a story about her child being able to play a strategic game like chess, but taking a couple of hours to get ready for an appointment. And that sparked a memory I had of Helena. I was driving her to my house, and I lived on the opposite side of town from her. And I thought she was passed out in the passenger seat. We had not been talking the whole drive. But as we passed by the 7-Eleven gas station closest to my house, she said, gas is more expensive on this side of town. And it really took me by surprise because when I looked over at her, her eyes were already closed again. And I thought, how does she remember gas prices all over town, but she has no concept of time? I have to wait 20 minutes at a minimum every time I pick her up, even though I give her plenty of notice. And these inconsistencies are frustrating and they're confusing. And it's easy to wonder, are they lazy? Don't they care about my time or their appointments? Am I doing something to contribute to this behavior? The thing is, those aren't the best questions to be asking ourselves, but that's where our brains are conditioned to go. Instead, let's look at what's happening in their brain, the science behind these confusing behaviors. There's a reason for them, and I find it fascinating. Knowing this will help us understand how to support our kids in a way that acknowledges their current capabilities while also helping them build or strengthen other capabilities over time. It also helps our mental health because when we understand them, we can stop questioning everything they do, stop thinking everything that they do is wrong. We can have more compassion. And of course, that's all going to lead to peace of mind. As we look at what's happening in their brain when substances are being used regularly, try not to get stuck in the weeds trying to remember every part of the brain that I'm mentioning. Just listen to get the overall concept so that you can apply it to your child and understand them better. If you really do want to remember the parts of the brain that I'm talking about, you can listen more than once. But the first time, just try to listen for the overall concept and understanding. Substance use changes the brain, and different areas of the brain are affected in different ways. The prefrontal cortex is the brain's command center. It's responsible for planning, self control, and long term decision making. I often refer to it as the thinking and reasoning part of the brain. Repeated substance use disrupts the neurotransmitter systems in the prefrontal cortex, leading to reduced activity, diminished control over impulses, and impaired decision making. The brain isn't as strong in these areas as it once was. So think about how a muscle gets weaker when it's not used as much. This reduced cognitive function makes it hard for someone to organize, prioritize, or follow through on tasks. That's why something as simple as putting their shoes on for an appointment can feel so overwhelming to them. The dopamine system or reward center gets flooded with dopamine, or the brain gets flooded with dopamine, which teaches it to seek instant gratification. And a disrupted dopamine system affects motivation, that sense of urgency, and future planning. The brain prioritizes immediate gratification over long term consequences. If an activity doesn't offer an immediate reward, like getting ready for an appointment, it feels pointless. But if it's something engaging, like chess, if that's what a person likes, or useful to their survival, like tracking gas prices, then it captures their full attention. Motivation based attention. That is what Helena was using when she was tracking gas prices. That was aligned with her meeting her immediate needs. Knowing the lowest gas prices helps save money for substances. It has a clear, tangible reward, and it fits into the brain's hyperfocus on immediate gains. Learning that made me curious about math because Helena could also do math in her head shockingly fast, while I counted on my fingers or got out my phone and used the calculator on it. I assumed that math took place in the prefrontal cortex, but only the more complex calculations take place there. Basic math happens in the parietal lobe, which isn't as affected by substance use as other areas of the brain are. In addition to that, her brain also may have prioritized that skill, that motivation based attention I mentioned a few minutes ago, because it was math for survival, which made it immediate and rewarding. The sense of urgency that were associated with the tasks that required quick math and the dopamine that came with those tasks was powerfully reinforcing. I also learned a new term in my research. Time blindness is a term used in psychology and neuroscience. It refers to difficulty perceiving, estimating, or managing time, often resulting in issues with punctuality, planning, and future oriented thinking. That makes future oriented tasks like preparing for an appointment feel abstract or irrelevant. It also creates a tendency to underestimate or overestimate how long tasks will take. I think that parents have their own form of time blindness. This is just a correlation that I made, not something that I'm aware of as part of neuroscience. We have problems with overestimating and underestimating how long things will take as well. We think recovery should be fast and linear. We assume if they've gone to treatment that they should be improving consistently, but real recovery has ups and downs. It has pauses and restarts. It's never a straight path and there's no time limit. We see what's possible for our kids and assume that they should get there faster because we would get there faster. We think if they would just do this one thing, life would be so much better or easier for them. But just because we see that way forward, it doesn't mean that they're ready to take it or that it's the right way for them. And another thing is, we expect our own emotional healing to happen quickly. We think, like, I've been working on boundaries. Why do I still feel this way? But emotional shifts take a lot of time, just like behavioral changes. And I always like to point out ways that we are like our kids and we are more like them than we realize. And it helps for us to see our similarities rather than to be so focused on our differences. The hippocampus is responsible for storing new memories and retrieving stored memories. It doesn't analyze or apply the memories like the prefrontal cortex. It just helps create the memories and recall them. The hippocampus works closely with the prefrontal cortex, which processes, organizes, and applies the memories that the hippocampus creates and stores. Substance use, stress, and trauma impair communication between the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, leading to poor decision making, being impulsive, and difficulty applying past experiences to future actions. That difficulty applying past experiences to future actions is important here. Because you know how it makes us crazy that our kids don't seem to be learning from their mistakes and they make some of the same ones over and over again? Well, that's the explanation for that. Weak connections between the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex can result in forgetting important details, struggling to apply lessons learned, and difficulty making sound judgments. If everything is working as it should in someone's hippocampus, they remember getting lost in a certain neighborhood. The prefrontal cortex will help them plan an alternate route the next time. But if both of those parts of the brain are weakened and they also aren't working well together, the person could repeatedly get lost in the neighborhood. So you could think of this metaphorically too. They also have trouble keeping track of commitments and remembering to complete basic tasks that can feel impossible. After learning the neighborhood analogy, I wondered, how can they get lost in the neighborhood multiple times but play a game like chess? The answer is, again, it involves different parts of the brain. Chess requires pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and short term strategy, all functions of the parietal lobe, and working memory, which is different than the memory in the hippocampus, which can remain intact even when other areas of the brain are compromised. Here's why they might excel at tasks like chess: pattern recognition. Substance use doesn't always impair that skill. It might be one of their preserved strengths. Flow state. If they enjoy chess, it can trigger focus and engagement, overriding the apathy often associated with substance use. Cognitive reserve. Not all areas of the brain are equally affected by substance use, meaning some capabilities like chess might remain highly functional. The last part of the brain I'm going to talk about is the amygdala. This is where emotions live, where emotional regulation happens. So, substance use can heighten anxiety, frustration, and apathy, leading to avoiding stressful or uncomfortable tasks or situations. The result is procrastination or disengagement from tasks that require emotional effort, even when they are logically necessary. Like they say they want to go to the doctor or therapist, but then they don't make the call to make the appointment. So, what does all of this mean? It means that behaviors make sense when we understand the brain. The frustrating inconsistencies that we see when someone's able to play chess but struggling with time or remembering gas prices but not appointments aren't about laziness, defiance, or lack of caring. They're about how substance use affects different areas of the brain and which functions we remain strong versus which ones become weakened. Understanding this helps us let go of frustration, to stop taking these things personally, thinking it has something to do with us or them not respecting us, and to work with that reality instead of resisting it. But understanding the brain is just the first step. The next question is, how do we shift our perspective to work with these capabilities instead of resisting and working against them? That's what we're going to cover in part 2. I decided to split this into 2 episodes because it's just so much information in one, and I wanted to give your brain a natural pause and time to digest that information. I'm releasing both of these episodes at the same time, but it just seemed like it was going to be way too dense for one episode. So, in part 2, we'll talk about how we can support our kids in ways that acknowledge their current capabilities while helping them build new ones. We'll also explore how to create structure, motivation, and trust without overwhelming them or ourselves. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. If you found this episode helpful, I'd love for you to take a moment to leave me a 5-star review. Your feedback helps other parents find the support they need. If you're tired of feeling stuck, scared, and unsure about what to do next, you can schedule a road to recovery call with me. We'll explore what's possible for you and your family with support from somebody who truly understands. You don't have to navigate this alone. The Road to Recovery call link is in the show notes and on my website. Until next time, remember that taking care of yourself isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. You matter too.